All right. You're live.
Great.
Lisa.
Hi.
So let's talk about Everglades Law Center, who you are, what's going on. Big news that the city of Stewart just jumped in to your amicus brief with you guys.
Yep, it was filed last week.
Other parties, just all the goodness. I'm going to let you
Yep.
just
All
share
right.
all the details.
Okay, sure. I'll just start off with just a little bit about Everglades Law Center.
Mhm.
We're a not-for-profit law firm, 501c3. We are 4 attorneys right now. We represent clients working on issues relative to Everglades restoration. We work on projects that could impact Everglades restoration. We work with the Corps and local governments and the Water Management District to move Everglades restoration forward. And in this issue that we're talking about today, we are involved in a matter that is a challenge to an Everglades restoration project. And we have prepared at this court hearing and at a previous court level an amicus curiae brief, which is a friend of the court brief.
I thought I was saying it wrong.
I hate that word too.
Amicus.
Yeah. But so we prepared a friend of the court brief for several different groups and local governments to weigh in on this challenge by the sugar industry to a really critical Everglades restoration project down in the central part of the region, the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir Project.
Who are you guys, and how did you originally get involved in this appeal? Were you a part of the original case? Or?
Yeah, we represent, we're a law firm. We're not like a client. We are actually the lawyers. So we represent a bunch of different groups and local governments and civic organizations and whatnot on this matter and on other matters affecting Everglades restoration. So, we can go back a little bit at some point and we'll talk about like what started the case and what it was about. But we got involved in it because we recognized that it was really important to Everglades restoration, that our vision of Everglades restoration could be seriously impacted by the case, and what the benefits that, we'll see from Everglades restoration could be impacted. And it would go that the court's holding could possibly go just beyond this one project and really derail Everglades restoration entirely. So we knew it was really important. And that's why we got some groups to join us to join and file a brief at the lower court level. And we could maybe we should go back and start talking about all that stuff.
I was very happy when you reached out to the city. Mm-hmm. Because I thought it was over, right? I thought the case was done. I had seen some of the judges.
Right.
I don't know if you call them orders or comments, but I thought, oh, well, I wish we would have been a party to that. And the county. I wish we all would have jumped in on that to defend the use of STAs.
Yeah.
Back when, but it's over, and it seems like it mostly went our way, right? So.
Yeah, it was actually really timely. And the reason that we did reach out to the city of Stewart was just because we recognized that there's a lot of local governments in South Florida that are seriously impacted by today's water management system. And so we need to make sure that their voices are heard, especially when this case is now up at the 11th Circuit, which is, they don't know what's happening here in South Florida. They don't necessarily read the news, and they don't.
Where's the 11th Circuit even?
Up in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
So, they're not the judges there aren't necessarily familiar with our local issues. Is that
intentional to have it be removed from the location? Is that within the judicial system? Is that?
Not necessarily just to physically remove it. I think it's more just the fact that that's where there's, that's where the
judges are.
That's where the appellate court is located.
Got it.
And it just happens to be outside of our geographic area.
So I was thrilled because, again, I thought we were done. I thought it was over. Mm-hmm. And obviously Sugar's going to appeal, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have that many lawyers, they need something to do.
They have a lot of lawyers.
But to be able to have a shot at joining in unofficially, right, a amicus.
Right, we're not parties to the case. Our clients are not parties to the case, but they are. They kind of have a special role where they can explain their interests, and they don't necessarily have to stick to all the exact legal issues that were raised. They're encouraged to bring different perspectives, and that's why we thought it was really important to include as many different groups as we can. So why don't we take a step back though and just talk a little bit about the case.
Yep.
And where it started and how it's progressed and where we are, and then maybe we can dive into some of the specific issues and whatnot.
Let's do it.
Okay, so back in, well, I was going to go back to 2021 when the Sugar Industry Challenges case, but maybe I should even go back a little bit further when this project was approved. And it's the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir and Stormwater Treatment Area project. Some people might be familiar with it as part of the whole Senate Bill 10 situation from a few years back when the state of Florida passed legislation directing them to move forward with the Everglades Agricultural Area, or EAA, reservoir project. That resulted in a project that was, I unfortunately don't have the exact size of it, but relatively smaller footprint, a very high and deep storage reservoir with a accompanying stormwater treatment area that was going to clean the water. This would have a significant benefit for the city of Stewart and other areas that get discharges from Lake Okeechobee, because it would reduce the discharges pretty significantly, upwards of 50%. So it's an important project to move forward. It was one of the first projects that was identified as part of Everglades restoration back when Everglades restoration was originally approved back in 2000. The EAA reservoir was one of those first identified critical projects that they knew needed to move forward, kind of as like a backbone of SERP and to really move restoration forward. And unfortunately, it's had a lot of stops and starts and has seen significant changes. And it has only recently just got moving forward because of the efforts with Senate Bill 10 and the state of Florida pushing the project and moving it forward. So the project was approved back in, I think, 2014 or something like that, quite a while ago. It didn't get a lot of opposition or anything at the time that it was going through its approval process. I mean, folks weighed in and had different input, but I think that the project was pretty generally accepted and there wasn't a lot of opposition. But a couple years ago, the Corps started another effort to change the lake regulation schedule from the LOR's 2008 regulation schedule. Now they're looking at the LOSOM, Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. Mm-hmm. And as part of that, they had to determine what they were going to use as their baseline for evaluating the project benefits and benefits both the agriculture, water supply, the environment, etc. And so to determine whether the project would improve or worsen any of those conditions.
It seems strange, though, to wait till 2021 to challenge the way water was being used under LORS. Was it sort of it's going to be codified through another layer very shortly with LOSOM, so if we're going to challenge it, we need to do it now?
I think that they recognized that the Corps was not going to use the baseline that they had hoped. Just let me take a step back even further and just talk about like what we're talking about, a baseline, and why is that even important?
In human speak.
Why is that even an important issue? Let me so let me just go back and look and see where I'm going to find it here.
There's a lot.
I got a lot of papers.
That's good.
I brought a lot.
That
of
is
papers,
a prepared lawyer. If you showed up with, your iPhone and, oh man, geez, I don't know.
So
you're ready.
One of the things that was originally conceived when Everglades restoration was first being developed is the concept of assurances. And how do you part of the problem in getting Everglades restoration moving back in the late 90s and early 2000s was that there wasn't a lot of consensus on how to. Are you looking for?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what page.
This is actually.
That's the original.
This is actually Judge Middlebrook's order that I was just looking for.
Got it.
Because it had.
That's not the appeal.
No, it had an easy reference that I was looking for. But the reason that it was important to get people, to kind of get this concept of assurances and how were we going to do this project and was the Everglades actually going to get restored? Were discharges to the coastal estuaries actually going to be reduced? This is a lot of Everglades restoration was conceptual at the time. It was all based on modeling, and it was a lot of new science. And it was a pretty big change to how things had operated up until that point. So it was a very new program, and it wasn't just the environmental community and those Everglades supporters that were concerned. It was the agricultural industry and municipalities, municipal water supplies, also that had concerns about their assurances. And they wanted to make sure that the Everglades weren't restored basically off their backs, that their water wasn't taken to restore the Everglades. And so that was kind of like a fundamental concept, that the water that the Everglades restoration was supposed to produce was basically going to be new water. It was increasing the size of the water pie. It wasn't something that was going to take from one source to give to another. You know, Everglades restoration wasn't supposed to be done by taking municipal water supplies and restoring the Everglades with them. And so there just wasn't a lot of trust amongst the different kind of interest groups at the time. And so these concepts of assurances took a long time to work out and required a lot of back and forth and discussion. And so what ended up in the WRDA 2000, which is the bill that approved the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan initially, was this concept of a savings clause. And what that basically said is kind of what we've been discussing, which is that it kind of provided the concept that the Everglades restoration would not eliminate or transfer sources of water for water supply interests or the environment until a new source was made available. And that's kind of how it's written. And basically what it says...
continue to get the water that you have been getting as long as... And if SERP...
Yeah, like a SERP is
specifically around SERP. So if you start getting less
Right.
water because of SERP will provide...
Right. I mean, it was
water.
just basically that, you know...
But not like macro if there's a 100-year drought.
Right.
That SERP is going to provide you the water supply you've always had.
That's right. It really didn't speak to that. What it spoke to is that as a part of implementation of the SERP plan, water supplies would not be reduced without a new water supply being made available.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're taking water, if you're reducing the amount of water in a water reservoir or in a storage area, that's as part of this restoration plan, like as a SERP component, you have to make new water available for the users. That was the concept in very broad terms of the savings clause.
And so
but the specific language is very important. And so I kind of want to just be able to like, it's not too long. I just kind of want to like eliminate, like put that out there for people so that they can have the actual language.
Got it.
But so what the savings clause was, it was kind of a central provision of the SERP. But what it said is that it's no elimination or transfer. And it says, until a new source of water supply of comparable quantity and quality as that available on the date of enactment of this act is available to replace the water to be lost as a result of implementation of the plan, the Secretary and the non-federal sponsors shall not eliminate or transfer existing legal sources of water, including those for an agricultural or urban water supply, and the environment is also one of the protected entities under the savings clause. So you can't take water from the one part of the environment and give it to another without protecting and making new water available. And that was kind of like the whole concept. So there's some really important limitations. And, you know, what the sugar industry has argued, so what they've argued is that this protects them from any loss, any diminution of their water supply.
Ever.
And Everglades ever. And anything, no matter what it is.
Right.
And Everglades restoration is required to make whole forever, no matter what the cause of the reduction in water supply. So, okay, now just kind of going back to where I was with, you know, where we were in the process, you know, when these LOSOM conversations were happening, especially early on in that process, in about 2000, 2019, 2020 was when I believe that process started, right around that time. And they the Corps indicated that they were going to be that they weren't going to be evaluating the project based on the 2000 baseline, which is the date of enactment of WRDA 2000, December 11th, I believe, 2000. That they weren't going to be using that baseline, and that is the level of water supply available as of that date. And for agriculture, they consider that the water that was available under the WSE Water Supply and Environment Lake Regulation Schedule, which had a higher maximum lake stage, about a foot and change higher than the subsequent LORS 2008 schedule. So when the Corps indicated that they were not going to be using that 2000 baseline, but instead were going to be using 2008, I suspect that that ignited some concern in the sugar industry.
But have they ever not had enough water?
No, I mean,
is it truly logistical, or is it just about keeping your hand on the lever and having control? Like, why?
I mean, I think that they see this as one threat. I mean, I really don't know. I suspect that they see this and what's happened with LORS 2008 as one instance, but, and as do we, certainly not the only instance of things that could impact water supply. And if the Corps is allowed to consider these intervening events, and if Everglades restoration doesn't have to make up for them, then they don't have the assurance that they don't have the insurance policy, and they don't have a guarantee of water like they kind of expected and think that they are entitled to. So,
but even in the, driest periods that we've had, have they ever really not
right? No, and that's
function?
Right, and that's what we were showing, and that's one of the things that we argued about in our brief was that in these last 15 years where they've been operating in LOSOM or in LORS 2008 with this reduced water supply.
Has there been an issue?
No.
Right.
There hasn't been an issue. And in fact, going back all the way as far as we have records, there's only one instance where they were able to show any impact on the water supply and on their actual yields. So even though they have less, if you have way more than you ever needed, having less than that amount still doesn't really impact your bottom line.
And all of this infrastructure was thought up, planned, and is starting to be built to try to address a serious, collection of problems.
Right, that's right.
So are you not able to give a little bit here?
I mean, you would think that would be...
I get defending your interest, but...
I mean, I get...
Can be reasonable.
It's amazing because the sugar industry falls all over themselves to say how much they support Everglades restoration, but yet this is the key fundamental cornerstone project of Everglades restoration. It's been identified since 2000 as one of the most important and critical projects. Right.
It's our hope over here. This is like the main,
of course it is.
Hopefully one day that EAA
Hopefully
gets
one
built.
day it gets built, or somehow something helps to stop these discharges because the city's getting pounded.
For 100 years.
Absolutely pounded. And I mean, how much more can it take? And it's crazy when you compare the harm. And that is really why we were like, we need to reach out to the city of Stuart because they're some of the most harmed of any local governments. And the local governments that we are, all the local governments that we're representing are significantly harmed by today's water management system and are reliant on Everglades restoration to help and fix that and change it.
So quickly, in summary, I guess, maybe stepping back from the technical side of it, which I love and I want to go right back to. But what would be the implications of sugar winning this case in terms of water management?
I mean, honestly,
your mouth.
I think Everglades restoration would be done. It would be done. Because who's going to build major restoration projects only to give the water to sugar? It's not even, it doesn't even comply with the purposes that SERP was authorized. I think that Everglades restoration would pretty much be over or have to be completely re-envisioned. At least the part of Everglades restoration that's affected by Lake Okeechobee and those issues because of the changed baseline.
It would effectively kill SERP.
Yeah, it would.
Except
and
for
we can talk about it in more detail, but the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir can hold 240,000 acre feet of water, which is a pretty huge amount. It's about a half a foot of water in the lake. But unfortunately, as the result of the change in regulation schedules, it took a foot off of water storage from the lake. So even if we built the entire EAA reservoir, which is a multi-billion-dollar project, and spent billions of dollars of state and federal money building it, decades of time, we would only get half the way and give all the water that it created to sugar, every drop, and use it exclusively for sugar, meaning we didn't use it to reduce discharges to the coast.
None of it's going south.
We didn't send it south. We have to hold all of it in there. Or we only send it south when we could clearly fill it and make sure we have it filled full for ag. That would only get us half the way of restoring the water that the sugar industry says that they lost and that they're entitled to. So it's a pretty outrageous position that they have taken. It really is contrary to the whole purposes for which Everglades restoration was established. I mean, it's to restore the Everglades, and that's what we're trying to do. And obviously, the estuaries are a huge part of that, and reducing discharges to the estuaries are a fundamental part of that. And the sugar industry benefits from the project. They will be much better off. Their water supplies are improved as a result of this project.
In terms of quality?
No, in terms of quantity. This project increases their water supply, and the Water Management District goes into that in detail in their brief. This project significantly increases sugar's water supply, but it doesn't restore their levels to where they were previously.
Pre-Lors.
So they say that they need to be fully restored, and that because of these intervening events that have occurred, that this project needs to make up for them and give them that water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that leaves zero water available for Everglades. That leaves zero capacity available to reduce discharges. That's operating this multi-billion-dollar state and federal public works project for the benefit of one private industry.
Right.
And it makes zero sense, and it's 100% not what Congress intended. So it
pretty wild after all of the, they let it all just sort of, everybody talks and sets it up and gets everything going, and then waiting until the last minute to,
they did wait
from a
until the
technicality
actual last
standpoint,
minute.
redefine how it gets,
the
whole apparatus gets used.
Yeah, I mean, they were literally down to the last possible days of challenging the EAA reservoir project, because their problem wasn't with the EAA reservoir project. The EAA reservoir project increases their water. The problem was with Lors 2008. The problem with that is that they didn't challenge Lors 2008. And so Lors 2008 is already done, and it's past the time to legally challenge that. And so they that's why I think that we ended up where we are with this project being challenged. So let me just take a step back. So back in 2019 or 2021, I believe it was 2021, the sugar industry filed this challenge to the EAA reservoir project. They raised the issues that we have talked about, the issues with the savings clause. They also raised a couple other issues. One has to do with the operation of the stormwater treatment area.
That's something I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah,
too.
independent of the reservoir, and because they're both the stormwater treatment area and reservoir. The reservoir is being constructed by the Corps. It's a much bigger project than the stormwater treatment area. Obviously, building walls to store water 20 plus feet deep.
Huge, yeah.
It's a pretty big deal.
Yep.
And so that's going to take a few more years to get done. But the stormwater treatment area is supposed to be finished like this year. So their concern was that the Corps didn't evaluate operating the STA in advance of the reservoir. And I mean, the district completely responded to that argument, but that was one of their...
That was one where the judge had their back seemingly it's been a little bit since I read it, but those comments were something like, you have to take into account, you have to do an environmental impact study, or... I
mean, I think that it was more, the judge didn't really necessarily, I don't feel like he took their side. I think it was just that the facts did not support their argument, because that analysis is already being done, and the approvals that they are concerned about did not happen. So the approvals that the district got for the project are for the grow-in period. And so it allows them to operate the project to grow in the vegetation, because with the stormwater treatment area, it's all vegetation that's used just to clean the water and treat the water before it's discharged. You guys know all about it.
I found it interesting because it's sort of the first time I've really seen anywhere where we're talking about the environmental impact of that water coming off the lake to the area surrounding the STA, which to me, the implications of that are, well, what about the St. Lucie River?
Yeah. I mean,
for that to even be written down is wait, yes.
Yeah.
But what
about it?
Oh, what about over here? What about the environmental impact here? Let's do that. Let's talk about that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the benefits of the project to the St. Lucie River are significant. Obviously, it's going to reduce discharges from the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Number one thing, it's going to send more water south during the dry season so that there's not so much water in the lake in the wet season, particularly where you have high risk of algae blooms and high risk of high level discharges. So sending it, and historically what happens, and the reason that we don't end up with that water just being sent south is that historically the Corps has held the water in the lake during the dry season as a backup water supply for ag. So the Everglades dries out more than it should. It doesn't get the water supply that it needs. Florida Bay doesn't get the water supply that it needs, resulting in huge algae blooms, seagrass die-offs, major problems down in Florida Bay. Has significantly impacted the village of Islamorada suffers from the basically exact inverse kinds of problems that the city of Stuart does. It has fish that are fish kills. It has major algae blooms in its water bodies, but it's not because it gets polluted water. It's because it doesn't get enough water. Mm-hmm. And so they are also one of the groups that we represented. But that's why it's just, we really recognized that we needed to get more and more groups involved and be able to weigh in.
Did they initially approach you, or did you guys just proactively go after who's going to be affected? We reached out.
We knew the areas that were most likely to be impacted.
That's awesome.
And so that's why
Thank you.
That's we knew the group. We knew the areas that were relying the most on Everglades. They're the areas that are getting hammered. Okay, like Stuart, Sanibel, Islamorada. Down in Palm Beach County, we have the Lake Worth Lagoon that also gets impacted by discharges from Lake Okeechobee. So, and so the Sugars Challenge, I think that's what we were talking about before I kind of got distracted, but they filed their challenge and they raised all those issues. And in addition to the issue of, the savings clause and the issue of the operation of the STA, the last issue that separately from the reservoir, the last issue that they raised just had to do with the Corps' analysis under NEPA and whether or not they had properly considered the impacts to the sugar industry. So, like I said, we kind of recognized that this was a problem.
Can you go into that a little bit? NEPA and...
Yeah, I'm sorry. What it was is that under the National Environmental Policy Act, the Corps and any federal agency that's taking a significant action has to analyze all of the potential impacts of its action, including, impacts on different industries or affected parties or affected groups or whatever. And so part of their argument was just that they had failed to consider properly those impacts to the sugar industry, and that they should have given them more weight or something along those lines. So those were their three arguments under LORS. Under that the Corps, in approving the EAA reservoir project, had failed to, and particularly in approving the operations of the STA in advance of the reservoir, that in particular that had not been analyzed sufficiently. So that's those were kind of like the arguments that they raised. We knew this was a big deal, but this was at a district court level. We didn't intervene in the case as to defend the Corps as parties.
What were the judges? What was the judge's perception of those arguments?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so let me just say, before we get to what the judge said, the case was being decided on summary judgment. So that's basically just full briefing, written briefing that by both parties. And we saw that the Florida Farm Bureau and the Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association had sought to file briefs on amicus curiae, or front of the court briefs, on behalf of the sugar industry. And we were like, hey, listen, and this is at the district court level. Yes. And it's not necessarily, that's not really part of the process generally
It's not
speaking.
customary.
It's not customary to file for amicus briefs to be filed at the district court level. It's generally reserved for appellate cases. But because this case, under the Administrative Procedures Act, this is kind of an appellate posture. Cases to the district court challenging agency action are kind of in an appellate posture. In this case, the court allowed it, and so that allowed us to also file briefs at the district court level, at the lower court level. We represented 7 environmental groups. Friends of the Everglades, not Friends of the Everglades, Everglades Foundation, Captains for Clean Water, Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, several other groups, as well as a couple different chambers of commerce from the affected areas, from Sanibel and Isla Morada also got involved. So we raised a lot of the issues that I kind of talked about here. You know, we really wanted to talk about the implications of Sugar's argument, because we knew that the Corps was going to address the NEPA issues. We knew that the Corps was going to address the issues, and we expected the Water Management District to weigh in and address the issues relative to the operation of the stormwater treatment area.
But that macro view of the implications is huge.
But we
It's
really
easy to
wanted
get lost in the weeds of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and we really wanted the court to understand what is going to happen. How would this work?
Yeah.
How would Sugar's interpretation actually work? Because the way that we saw it, it was going to totally upend Everglades restoration and make it not even feasible to go forward anymore. And so we needed the court to understand that. So we filed the brief, and the court responded, and the court ruled in favor of the Army Corps of Engineers. The court said that the court, had a lot of different specific findings, but one of the key findings was that he found that LORS 2008 was not subject to the savings clause because it was what's considered an intervening non-SERP event. So it's something that is...
So savings clause was part of WRDA?
Yeah, the savings clause was part of WRDA. And so what the court found is that, the Sugar's water supply certainty was not reduced by the SERP project that they were being challenged, but instead had been impacted by LORS 2008. And LORS 2008 is not a SERP project. It's not a project in and of its own right. It's an operation schedule that was done primarily to help the Corps deal with the issues with the Herbert Hoover Dike and to facilitate the Corps' repair of the dike. And so that's what was done in 2008. The lake was lowered so that the dike wouldn't fail. I mean, that's not part of Everglades restoration. Everglades restoration, and what the court said is that Everglades restoration didn't contemplate how to repair the Herbert Hoover Dike and prevent people from being flooded. That wasn't part of Everglades restoration. That's a non-SERP, a non-Everglades restoration event. And it has had an impact on water supply. It has reduced the amount of water available to the sugar industry. There's no doubt it has. However, SERP doesn't have to make up for that because it wasn't part of SERP. And the savings clause, when read closely, as you're required to do, and read to the language, when you read the language of the savings clause, it specifically says that it applies to water that's lost as a result of implementation of the plan. And the plan is SERP. So if water is lost by something other than implementation of the plan, the savings clause does not apply to that. And so that's what the court found. And that's what we argued. That's what the Corps argued. That's what the Water Management District argued.
And how did the sugar lawyers counter that counter? What is the response to that?
They had a lot of different arguments. They have a lot of different arguments. They say that it's a guarantee. They tried to
just interpreting that clause basically.
Yeah, I mean,
no matter what.
They try to use some legislative history and suggest that the assurances were critical. And yeah, the assurances were important. However, this was a project, SERP is a project to restore the Everglades primarily.
It's in the name.
It is. It's funny that. It's about the Everglades, and it wasn't intended just to, or primarily to ensure water supply forever.
Right.
And, one of the things that we recognize is that there's a lot of things that could happen that could impact water supply. A lot. It could be a drought. It could be climate issues. A sinkhole could open up under the lake and suck it dry. I mean, it could happen. A lot of crazy things could happen. And,
And the government can't be on the hook for making sure that Sugar has enough water no matter what.
Yeah, but that was what they want. That's what they want. They wanted an assurance that their water supplies would not be reduced for any reason, ever, ever, ever. And that's not what the law said. That's not what they got Congress to write into the law. What the law says is as a result of implementation of this plan. So if it's not part of this plan, it's not, there's no guarantee for it. And that is supported by actions that the Corps has taken for decades. Back in the early 2000s, the Corps was developing its programmatic regulations to implement Everglades restoration. And as part of that, they developed guidance memorandum, which were that added further detail and further explanation to the issues that were discussed and described in those regulations. And, one of the guidance memorandums specifically dealt with this issue in particular, intervening non-SERP actions. And it describes how those types of occurrences don't impact or do or do not impact the baseline. And the baseline, again, is what projects are evaluated against to determine whether they're having a benefit over existing water supply or if they're impermissibly reducing water supplies. So, and what this guidance memorandum said is that there are intervening non-SERP activities and they do affect the baseline. And that's what this was, and it applied exactly. Now, the sugar industry argued that those guidance memorandum weren't actually finalized. They were prepared.
In what way?
Well, they were prepared by the Corps, and they were, they were public comment, and they got all the way to the final draft stage, and they were issued by the Corps and sent up their chain for review and approval by I'm not sure, but other higher entities maybe within the Corps.
And it just didn't get to that point?
Right. It just didn't ever get approved. And it wasn't just this one, but none of them did ultimately get approved. But although they are very good evidence of what,
the culture, the idea, the strategy.
Yeah, of kind of how the Corps
would Sugar have had access to that?
Yeah, they were part of it. I mean, they were part of the whole process of developing those, and it was a very public process. And so, that was just one more thing that it was really clear that those guidance memorandum had, even though they weren't finally issued and approved and binding, because they would have been binding, but even still, they're very reflective of what the intent was in terms of how we were going to interpret this and how the Corps was going to do and deal with things that happened in the interim during the time that Everglades restoration was being built and implemented.
So what is the next, how do you see this playing out?
So so the project, let's just take, before we get to that exactly, let me just go back and just say that we did, like I said, we won at the district court level, and the sugar industry has appealed that to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. So they've raised really all the same issues.
Nothing new's coming up.
Honestly, no. Surprisingly. I really thought we'd see more new arguments, but no, the arguments were largely the same. They were extremely prolifically briefed. The sugar industry filed, I think, maybe couple hundred pages, 250 pages or something or more between the sugar industry and their friends of the courts that joined them of briefing on this. Each of the sugar plaintiffs, there were 3 different plaintiffs. Each of them filed their own brief, which is pretty unusual. I mean, usually if you're on the same side, you collaborate, maybe file one brief, unless there are so many different issues that have to be divided up. I mean, I can certainly understand in that case.
Was it just 3 of the same brief, basically?
No, in this case, it was really just all of the exact same issues, just kind of rehashed by 5 different entities for them. Their 3 plaintiffs and their amicus.
Do you think that is just in response to now you guys jumping in the mix and having municipalities supporting
I don't know. I mean, we
Corps,
didn't
or-
really get municipalities involved until after we saw that the city of West Palm Beach and the Lake Worth Drainage District had joined the sugar industry. And so when we saw that those other municipalities were weighing in, it really just kind of struck us.
It's kind of historically always been the case, right? West Palm and Miami.
West Palm, not so much Miami, but
Okay.
certainly West Palm Beach. You know,
I know it's a little bit outside of the scope of what you're doing, but could you speak to that at all? Do you have a
I mean, I don't
sense of
really
what their
understand the
interest is?
political.
Right.
I mean, look, West Palm Beach gets relies. It has a surface water management system. Its water comes from on top of the ground.
Mhm.
Like they're drinking what is in the wetland next. You know, they have a series of canals and lakes and wetland management areas.
And doesn't that ultimately come from
and it
water going, it's southeast?
It comes
but-
from their drainage basin, and also they do get backup water supply
Right.
from the lake.
Right.
And you know, like ironically, the Lake Worth Drainage District also joined on behalf of the sugar industry, and they also get a backup water supply from the lake. Now, their primary water supply actually is seepage primarily from the Everglades. So you'd think that they would be more concerned about protecting their primary source of water supply, but instead
Right.
they went to bat for their backup water supply, Lake Okeechobee, when sending the water south through the Everglades
Will recharge.
will recharge their aquifer and is much more protective of their primary water supply.
That's why I was curious if you had some sense of like, why would you?
You know,
Is it just political? Is it just?
I mean, I think that I don't know, historic allies.
Yeah.
I'm really not sure. I can't really speak to the politics
right,
of why.
right.
But from a legal perspective, West Palm Beach does rely on the lake to some degree at some level for water supply. I don't think it's as significant. Certainly not the most significant impact. And, you know, one of the issues that we have raised repeatedly, and not so much in this brief, but just on policy matters, is that the city of West Palm Beach is impacted by Lake Okeechobee, less by its water levels, but more by its algae condition. When Lake Okeechobee is solid green with algae, guess who's not getting any water supply?
Right.
No one. No one's drinking that water. No one wants to take that water. They can't bring that water into their regional system because they just had a massive algae outbreak 2 years ago. Or was it last year? They just had a huge issue with toxic algae in their water supply. And they can't take any water from the lake that has algae in it. So if the lake is high and they're keeping the lake high for water supply purposes, that promotes more algae growth in the lake.
And doesn't Lors and ultimately LOSUM factor in them as stakeholders for their water supply?
I mean, yeah, they
I haven't dug into the details of how they're accommodated within LOSUM, but
I mean, I don't really. I know that West Palm. I don't really know how specifically they are. I know that West Palm Beach had a lot of questions about the impact on their water supply, and I know that the Corps did a lot of specific analysis in response to that, because it was all kind of happening and playing out around the time of the whole LOSUM was getting kind of finalized at the same time. I guess it was last year that West Palm Beach was having just this like really bad outbreak of algae, which had impacted their water supply, and unfortunately was water with algae and whatnot in it was actually being distributed to their customers for quite some time without them being aware of it.
So their thought potentially is, I know this is like real speculative, but if water's in those STAs that's being cleaned, we could have that instead of that going into the...
I mean, I think that their
Everglades
concern
at
is
large
that
or
if
something.
once water enters into the Everglades, it can't ever be gotten back for those purposes. It's gone to them as a water supply source. I mean, certainly while Lake Worth Drainage District does get seepage and groundwater that's related to flows through the Everglades, West Palm Beach is more directly connected via canals. So I think that their interest is slightly different. I don't know.
Got it. That makes sense.
I don't know that. I mean, I just think it's really ironic because like their main issue, they haven't been prevented from taking water from the lake because the lake's been too low. That hasn't happened.
Historically, that's never been an issue.
I mean, it hasn't been an issue since Laura's 2008 has been in place. Instead, the issue is that algae
prevents them from taking water. And so since they can't take water from the lake because it has too much algae in it, then they are completely reliant on their regional system and whatever they can get out of rainfall or local water supply sources. So, I mean, West Palm Beach has done some stuff to improve their water supply performance that is unrelated to the lake, added some additional well fields, I believe, and taken other actions to help secure that.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully it won't be an issue going forward for them. But listen, when you have a surface water supply source, it's susceptible to algae. And we've always argued and thought it was really ironic that they're arguing for higher levels in the lake, which is a much greater threat to their water supply than low levels. When the lake is lower and clean, it's better for the lake to be low and clean than high and green. So, at least for water supply purposes.
That sounds like it should be a T-shirt.
Yeah, let's make T-shirts out of it.
Yes, Everglades Law Center. There you go.
There you go. Hey. So, yeah. I'll try to remember that one next time I'm talking about it.
Well, it's recorded, so
Okay.
we can always toggle back to it. So
Yeah.
what else in all of your papers?
So, I mean, I don't know. I brought so many papers here, but I really just wanted to have anything in case anything
That's awesome.
struck me that I had to like talk about. And
do you
just
feel
in
like
case you
that
wanted to look at any
sugar
of the briefs.
is kind of throwing a Hail Mary? Do you think that they have a chance? I know you're not the judge.
Not the judge.
But do you know?
I think it's a pretty far-fetched argument. I think that when you look at the implications of their argument, it could never have been what Congress intended.
Mm-hmm.
Congress never would have passed this plan just to give sugar water. They would have called it something else. They wouldn't have called it Restoring the Everglades and American Legacy Act.
Right.
They would have called it something different. We wouldn't have gone through all this to restore the Everglades if we first had to keep sugar whole for any circumstances, no matter what, whether it be climate change, a drought, water being given to someone else, a giant sinkhole, or any other far-fetched thing that could happen in our lifetimes and many lifetimes into the future, you know? And like, I think that from the sugar industry's perspective, they realize, okay, so
It's worth a shot.
listen, only 8 years in, and their water supplies are reduced. And honestly, I kind of get some of their arguments. I mean, one of their arguments is that there is some fairness.
Mm-hmm.
If the Corps can just take actions to change the amount of water that is available, like by changing the lake regulation schedule, even if it's for very legitimate purposes, like protecting human health and safety from a catastrophic failure of the dike, if they can take actions like that reduce their water supply, then there's a lot of other things that could happen that could reduce their water supply. And I think that they truly expected that their water supplies would be kept whole no matter what.
But it seems like a conversation about priorities, right? Now there are other priorities that are being factored in. It's not just you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's not. It always has been.
You've been the only one at the,
It always has been them.
But now there's people and their physical health and wellness. There's,
Yeah, physical health and wellness. I mean, look, when our coasts turn green, people wake up. And even politicians wake up.
People freak out.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
Very rightly so. They're traumatized.
To their credit, they freak
out. Listen, they got a lot of trauma here from all this. This has hurt this community. Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Has this community and the others like it have experienced true, serious, significant harm. The sugar industry hasn't experienced any harm. Even as a result of, even when there's droughts. Even when there's droughts, sugar's yield remains the same. And that's some of the things that we included in our brief.
How far back did you research that? Did you just go through Loris or did you go back further?
I mean, we went back and looked at it, but we relied largely on a report by the University of Florida.
Mm-hmm. IFAS did it?
Yeah, IFAS did a report, and it concludes that, let me just see if I can find it. But, so let's see. Yeah, here's what they said. They said...
What page are you on?
I'm on page 26. It says that an independent technical review coordinated by the University of Florida Water Institute, this was as part of planning for an update to the lake regulation schedule, indicated that modeling may overstate harm to agriculture and urban water supply. So, and what it is saying is that it's concluding that it's not clear that the current hydrologic surrogates, and what that is modeling. A hydrologic surrogate refers to modeling. It's not clear that current hydrologic surrogates adequately represent the economic implications of agriculture and urban water supply shortages in South Florida. The NRCS, that's the Natural Resources Conservation Service, reviewed 25 years of agricultural water supply data and compared that information with historical data on crop yields and found that only one drought year in 1982 resulted in a significant shortage of irrigation water. And historical data such as this should be compared with the agricultural water shortages produced to ensure that the projected water shortages and the estimated economic losses are realistic, because the accuracy of economic losses across sectors is essential for assessing trade-offs between water supply and environmental health of sensitive natural areas or water bodies. So, I mean, and then, in that year in 1982, I believe, I don't think it's mentioned here, I think it was in another report, it was a freeze year. There was a freeze that year as well. There was some other climatological effects which could have been attributed to the loss. So, I mean, it's kind of like, look, if you got $1 billion and someone takes $1 million, are you going to feel it? You going to feel it? How bad is it going to hurt? $1 million is a lot of money. But if you have $1 billion, it's not going to hurt that much. And that's pretty much where they are. They're billionaires in terms of their water supply. So taking some of their water supply and reducing it, yeah, do they feel it? I don't know. It reduces the amount that they have, but it doesn't show up in their bottom line.
And it was the whole point of going through the LOSM process was now we're going to factor in other stakeholders. Like, you're not the only one.
Yeah. The Corps was trying to take a fresh look.
It's going to some extent
try to balance
out. You're going to lose some control or whatever that word is. Like,
I mean, I've been doing this for more than 20 years, and I can say that the one thing that we have gotten is a more balanced approach to water management. The needs of communities are considered, if not on par with agricultural or water supply interest, at least they are being considered. Legitimately and truly being considered.
Harmful algae blooms be in the wording to even have human health is revolutionary compared to what it was.
But like if legislation was passed that required the Corps to manage Lake Okeechobee differently to prevent or reduce the likelihood of algae blooms, it's totally possible, right? Could happen. Hasn't happened yet, but maybe it would. Maybe something else will happen. I mean,
I see you and just the legal apparatus in general, right? It's either the president, the Congress, or a federal judge that, alters how this all is going to work, this apparatus.
Yeah.
I see the legal side as the tip of the spear in refining how, LOSM gets operationally, how it's going to work actually.
Yeah. Well, we need to protect the Corps' ability to operate its water management system, because that was our concern, is that, listen, if this is how it's supposed to work, if the sugar industry is right, or if a judge accepts their interpretation of this, it's going to seriously impact the Corps' ability to manage the Central and Southern Florida project, this whole system that we are part of. Because if they have to make the sugar industry whole for any losses, and not just the sugar industry, any entity that is impacted by operations.
I mean, was that even the interpretation pre-Lors?
No.
Right.
Never.
That's like, we want more than we've ever even had now.
We want a guarantee. We want a promise. We want you to indemnify us against future losses, no matter what.
Right.
The sugar industry is basically asking Everglades Restoration to indemnify them, to give them an insurance policy, however you want to say it, to prevent any losses to their water supply for any purpose. So no matter what it is, they want Everglades Restoration to make it whole. And unfortunately, it will basically bankrupt Everglades Restoration and take all of its water, leaving no water left to, if water is the currency of Everglades Restoration, this would bankrupt Everglades Restoration. That's
a fancy multi-billion-dollar machine you're building there. I think it works for me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's pretty much what they're trying to do here. So, I think it's a pretty far-fetched argument We recognize it as a crazy, far-fetched argument. And so, however,
Do you see it coming
it's,
back once we get into Losum
yeah.
somehow?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I think
oh
too.
yeah.
I think it's a
It's-
setup. If you
it's
didn't challenge it
gonna-
into Lures, you can't do it now. So
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think a lot of it is going to have to do with how the court rules. They're not going to probably rule right away. You know, it's going to take a little bit of time.
do you see these municipalities that are in this, I keep saying it wrong, amicus,
Yeah.
as potentially being parties in that suit?
Yeah, I could.
Are you in conversation with
I mean, we haven't.
core legal at all to sort of work together?
I mean,
If and
certainly
when
we
that comes
will.
up,
Look,
assuming it will.
if that comes up, we certainly will be. We it's really important that we defend Everglades restoration. We've put so much work into it and have been working on it for decades, and we're finally getting to the point where we're making progress. Projects are going to be implemented, they're being built, and the sugar industry is still challenging them. And then, you know, what's really crazy is that, like, at the lower court level, the sugar industry you know, said, like, we're not trying to stop this project. We're not trying to, like, overturn it. We just want this additional analysis done. We want these assurances. We want the savings clause applied, but we're not trying to stop the project. Now they're trying to set aside the project. Like, now they are. They're done with that.
Because it didn't work out the way they wanted it to.
No,
Yeah.
they, you know, they're trying to set aside the project, which means set it aside. And that's exactly what would happen. It would be set aside, and it would never be picked up again if they prevailed.
It's dramatic language, but I see it as war.
You know, honestly,
We've
it's
moved past diplomacy when you're
it's,
trying to challenge the entire apparatus.
look, we
functionally.
we have to keep Everglades restoration moving forward. We can't afford to be slowed down. We can't afford to be waylaid or to have restoration no longer be dedicated to providing water for the Everglades and reducing discharges to the coast. We can't have it can't afford to make sugar whole. It wasn't made. It wasn't conceived to keep sugar whole under any circumstance. I mean, that was never part of it. It was to create new water, to be able to send water and create new places to hold water, not new water, because the water already exists. It's not new water, but we're finding places to hold it and store it and have it so that it's not clean it. And so it's not just being discharged to our coast and wasted, but instead it's being actually held and used. And so while that's the plan, and we're trying to get enough to fix the coastal estuary problem, reduce discharges from the lake, and actually get the water down to Florida Bay so we don't get fish kills and, you know, Isla Mirada doesn't get impacted at the other end of the system, there's just not enough water in that equation to keep sugar whole without raising the lake by a foot or more.
How do you guys eat? Because you're pro bono, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're
How
doing
is
this.
how are you? I mean, you're doing God's work, right? But how?
I mean, we are a not-for-profit organization. Right. We are a not-for-profit law firm. We are lawyers that represent groups fighting for the Everglades. We don't ever represent developers or anything like that.
How many?
But
how thick is your crew?
We have 4 attorneys.
Awesome.
And we have 4 attorneys and an operations director. And, you know, we have, we're very small, mean and lean.
Nimble.
Yeah, nimble. Exactly. We, you know, we are funded by grants, donations to a lesser extent, much lesser extent, client paid fees, but primarily grants and donations is what supports our work. So, you know, and we've been doing work here for a long time. We've done work. I mean, we're doing this work up here with the city of Stewart, and we're really grateful for that new relationship and the ability to hopefully work on other things coming up. Like you said, LOSOM is going to be an opportunity, another test, an opportunity for us to see what happens and see whether there might be more opportunities for us to engage.
That's why it's part of why I was so looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah.
To now know you.
Yep.
And be involved with them going forward. It's perfect.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to kind of strengthen numbers because obviously we share a lot of the same goals, and I think there's a great opportunity. Yeah, you know, Everglades Law Center has been around for a long time.
What's the history? Yeah, give me the background.
Yeah, I mean, we've done quite a bit of work here in Martin County. We've been involved in legal cases back in the early 2000s that have had a major impact on growth management and are some of the most important and cited growth management cases statewide. It's one case was the Pinecrest Lakes, which was the Pinecrest development in Jensen. Was originally had some condos that were built in the front, and they violated the comprehensive plan. And I don't have the exact details of what that was, but it was a significant case that we were involved in. And those, for some reason, I don't remember that whether it was the setbacks or the density, but for some reason they violated the Martin County Comprehensive Plan, and it was challenged by some local homeowners who lived in the vicinity. And
they had to tear it down, right?
They had to tear it down.
That's huge.
It was built, it was one of those things where they built it during the pendency of the challenge. Like, it was challenged by Everglades Law Center, and it was...
And the hubris to just keep going.
They kept on building,
Yep.
And they kind of like thumbed their nose at the court and just ignored that and kept building, and those eventually got torn down. And that's that kind of enforcement mechanism within the Growth Management Act it was a very significant case, because it wasn't something that had ever been done before, but it did show that this Growth Management Act has teeth.
That's great.
Growth Management Act has teeth, and it's another important tool for not so much anymore, unfortunately, with
that's
everything
what
that's happened with the
state
attorney's fees and whatnot.
How do you see what's the future of growth management when the state is opening the door to?
It's hard.
Right.
It's really hard with all the preemption issues that have happened, all the fee shifting possibilities, and making potential challengers just individuals who are trying to protect their neighborhood.
Do you guys see an opportunity? Is there one? Is it sort of...
Unfortunately, it's hard, because it's hard to find groups that are willing to risk everything.
Right.
It's hard enough to convince a homeowner or someone who's impacted by a development that's going to happen next door. It's hard enough to convince them that they could challenge it, that they could be successful, and that they have the opportunity to do that. But if when there's a chance that they could be subject to attorney's fees for the opposing party, it makes it so impossible for any individual citizen to be willing to take that on. And I don't blame anyone for not doing that, because no one wants to put their personal, what they've personally created at risk to benefit the public good. And unfortunately, that's kind of where we are right now, is that we rely on local governments now have to do better. There's no one that's going to come in and save the day at the end of the day.
How can we do better?
Well, just making sure that that you're looking at the big picture, that you're looking at more than just whether it's good for developers, whether it impacts communities, listening to communities when they come and speak, and listen, listening to them when they come and oppose a project or have concerns. I think that Martin County and the city of Stuart have kind of a different ethic than what we've experienced in Palm Beach County. Thankfully, Palm Beach County we've gotten a little bit better recently with some of the recent decisions. There was a big project there, a major land swap they were going to do, and it went through several years of analysis, and we were pretty sure that it was going to get approved, but eventually they denied it just a few weeks ago.
There was a land use change.
Yeah, it was a major land use change where they were going to be swapping and building on preserved land. They had 600 acres of preserved land down adjacent to the Everglades in West Boynton, and they were planning on unpreserving that and preserving land elsewhere about 20 miles away in exchange for unpreserving and building in the more lucrative area. It was something that's been kind of evaluated for a few years. It's been back and forth. And listen, we had a ton. They added so many sweeteners to it, you wouldn't believe. I mean, they were building all different kinds of cultural centers and schools, and they're planning on building a major water storage reservoir up for the city of West Palm Beach, and just all of these things that they added on. And the fact that the county was actually willing to deny it was surprising, because
you can't get it back once it's gone, man.
Listen, it's so true. And
baffle boxes don't do what tree roots do.
Listen, you guys are up here kind of in the crossroads now, because Palm Beach County is really reaching build out, and if Palm Beach County doesn't keep allowing development,
that's what it feels like.
Like if Palm Beach County holds a line in the Everglades agricultural area, doesn't allow development, because development's not allowed there now. It's one of the places that doesn't have any underlying residential density associated with it. Like most land use has some
But isn't that the plan?
Well, that was the plan.
Right.
However, and that always was the plan. But yeah, I mean, if Palm Beach County holds that and doesn't allow development there, they have to move somewhere.
Right.
And they're moving up.
It does feel like the bullseye is coming up to us.
The bullseye is definitely coming up to you guys. So the next 10 years, I think, are going to be critical for this area. So just always focus on protecting your natural resources, listening to communities. You don't have to, you can say no. And that's what I try to tell people in Palm Beach County. Like, if you don't say no, they're never stopping. Like, if you keep saying yes, 100%, they're coming back.
Yeah.
Like, they're never
It's an insatiable
going to,
animal that will never end.
they won't stop
no.
until you say no. If you
Right.
say no and then stick with that, and that's the answer, when no is the final answer, it becomes futile. And so I don't think that we're necessarily there yet in Palm Beach County and other places in South Florida, but certainly you guys up here are going to be looking at that a lot more development threats, I'm afraid.
My mindset is if you stop allowing green space to be mowed down, right? If you say no to that and you protect the green space you have, that should encourage redevelopment.
Yeah,
Take
exactly.
your blighted areas, take your
start redeveloping.
old
There's tons of
development.
them.
Right. Do we have in the city? We have a ton of this. Right?
Yeah,
It's
so
always
do we.
cheaper to do green space, but we should want our older, beat up, tired, buildings downtown. There's a few I could name off. Let those be redone.
Let them be redone
right.
and
invest,
put new stuff
invest
in
into
there.
that. Right.
I mean, that's what keeps our communities vibrant.
Mhm.
Those like old shopping centers that
Right.
are underutilized or basically vacant, are just, there's opportunities there. We don't have to. Truly, in Palm Beach County, there's not any more space.
Okay.
Unless they're building on preserve land or in the Everglades agricultural area,
It's tapped out.
it's very largely done for large scale. Now they're still building it, but they've got the approvals already. A lot of them are still getting built out. But yeah, I mean, they just recently in Palm Beach County, in northwestern Palm Beach County, they approved tens of thousands of acres of development in a multitude of different projects, different densities, different localities. Some are in Palm Beach Garden, some are in
It's
Palm Beach
effectively
County.
on swamp, though, right?
No, not necessarily. I mean, a
No.
lot of it's former ag land,
Got it.
citrus groves.
True. With greening, you've got
Citrus groves.
right.
There's some, about 5,000-10,000 acres of
Yep.
citrus groves in western Palm Beach County that are converting.
Yep.
That was one of the projects that was, involved in that swap.
Mhm.
It's just that, there's certain areas of Palm Beach County that are more lucrative to develop than others. West Boca, West Boynton being one of the highest, the peak of kind of residential development potential.
Mhm.
Houses go for a couple million apiece, if not a few. And so, look, they had an opportunity. What they wanted was an opportunity to build there and then preserve this land up in the acreage Loxahatchee area, which is a lot less lucrative. So they were going to reduce their units up there that they have already gotten approved.
Mhm.
3,000, almost 4,000 units that are approved up there. They were going to reduce the number of units up there and then just build them down in West Boynton next to the Everglades. And apparently not this time. Palm Beach County finally said no.
Thank
So,
you. You don't have
hey,
to.
Don't have to. You don't have to. And if you don't say no, they're never going to stop. So, you kind of got to, at some point,
I'm all for people making money, right? Like,
heck yeah.
feed your kids, grow your
You
business.
need to do it.
But if you can't do it within, Martin County, the city of Stuart specifically has a very unique character
Yeah.
where not everything is to the max height. We have a 4-story
Right.
limit, but even with that, you can have a lot of 1 and 2-story
Right.
downtown on Colorado.
Yeah.
It feels charming. It doesn't feel so huge. It still has that small town thing.
Yeah.
So redevelop, but keep that same density, keep that same height.
Keep that same charm. And obviously,
Don't kill the golden goose that makes this place special.
listen, you guys have such a special place here. I think
Yep.
that you guys are on the right track, no doubt. Certainly, obviously, there's always going to be challenges. I know I've heard of a few that are.
There's a few brewing.
There's a few brewing, but there's a few that are brewing. But listen, if you stick with your roots, and I think that you guys are doing a great job in terms of trying to protect your area from the larger water threats.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen the city engaged in on the LOSOM and on the
Yes.
other things, and the communications from the city have been right on point. So I think that that's really good.
We're small, but we're loud. We're mighty.
No doubt.
I've been really proud of the people who live here. That even though we have a lot of new people moving here, there's still that those bones
Yeah.
of understanding, even with the new people that are coming in.
People
what
really
makes this
care
place
here.
special?
People really care here. I remember back in the day, we used to come up and do these like forums, like community forums, and we'd talk about environmental issues and growth management stuff and projects that were upcoming. And they'd be on a Saturday morning, and they'd be like at the library or
Packed.
something, and it would be packed.
Yep.
Standing room only. That does not happen other places.
Right.
There's not, and I don't know if it's just because Martin County's always had that, and the city of Stewart as well
It's
as
part of the
that.
DNA, man.
It's kind of part of the. It's kind of part of the ethic here, I guess, is to care about that, and I'm just thankful for it. I wish we could kind of reproduce that for other parts of the system and have such engaged communities, because if we did, it really helps. It really, really helps. And that's one of the things that I don't think people realize is that communities engaging. I mean, sure, the city of Stewart's going to engage, right? You guys are getting punched out right and left by these water management issues. Obviously, you guys are going to engage. But I wish that others would engage too, that weren't suffering that level of harm, but could just stand with those that are, just to help give strength in numbers, because we all rely on Everglades restoration. Everyone in South Florida. If you drink water in South Florida, you're basically relying on the Everglades.
Trajectory wise, right? Like, what kind of Florida is going to be here for not just your kids, but your grandkids and their kids? And, if this, it can be so short-sighted with making money and it just being a business opportunity. It's like an investment. You've read The Swamp, right?
Yeah.
Right. So the Ponzi scheme that is Florida development,
Yeah.
right? If you don't refine that,
Listen, I know.
it's all going to be
It's going to be
concrete.
too late at
Like,
some point,
yeah.
And like if you look at that, like those 1,000 Friends of Florida, like Florida 2050 or 2070, where they're like analyzing what the state's going to look like under our current growth management, and if we don't do anything and make changes, and it's all developed. But, my hope for Florida is that we can protect as many special areas as we can, that we get the water right at some point soon, that these projects, that we can continue to move forward at the pace that we have been recently. Because for many years, Everglades restoration kind of languished. I mean, not languished, it moved forward, and we didn't feel like it was languishing, but now we've seen how much faster we can go and how much faster the Corps can go with the right type of funding, how with the state of Florida contributing, significantly and taking things off the Corps' plate and helping to move the projects forward. We've seen that like Everglades restoration can be more effective, can move forward so much more quickly, and we're seeing huge progress now. Like projects are coming online and becoming effective, and we're like projects are being like the largest projects that we've conceived are being built right now. So is it like everything that we would have wanted? I mean, is it the system? Are we creating the system that we would have created if we were in charge? Maybe not.
It'd have been nice for the EA to be a little bigger, so it wasn't 50-foot tall walls or whatever it is.
Exactly. I mean, it would have been great. And listen, we might get there.
Yes.
We might get there. And, I know that some groups have had concerns about like the EA reservoir, since you mentioned it. Yep. And the depth of the storage and whatnot. And listen, those are legitimate concerns. However, we need to move forward.
100%.
We 100%
Something's
cannot wait.
better than nothing.
We, what do they say? The perfect is the enemy of the good.
Yes.
And that's exactly where we cannot be on this.
You just hate for it to take, so many billions of dollars to figure out that maybe we needed more land for the EA.
Listen, and that's true, and maybe we do and maybe we don't. Yeah. But maybe, and if we do, I felt pretty confident that there are enough constraints in water quality law that if we do need more in order to meet the water quality goals that we have set,
good call.
We're going to have to. We're going to have to do it.
Because it almost seems impossible that you can hit those targets.
Right now, it seems like it feels like with the STAs and everything, almost like that we're on a boat. Okay, we're on a boat and there's like water in the boat. And there's so much water in the boat, but there's only like this much, like an inch of the boat sticking out of the water. Like any wave can just swamp it. And I feel like we need more freeboard. We need more STAs and more water quality treatment abilities so that not anything can swamp it. we need it to be stronger so that it
More
can
buffer.
withstand more buffer. Exactly. We need more buffer so that, you know, hey, if there's a heavy rain event, if a hurricane comes through, if something else happens, we're not swamped. We're not underwater. We're still able to operate the system and not have all of our stormwater treatment areas be over capacity and not working because they're too high or unable to clean the volumes of water that we need treated. You know, we might get to that point in the near future. You know, once this project is done and comes online, we might realize, hey, we need more. And if we do, okay, that's fine. That's a great,
Especially
that's a
on the-
better position to be in than to say, no, that project that you want to build, it's not good enough. And so we're going to stand back and oppose it because we want it to be better. Whether we want it to be better or not, if it's going forward, we need to support it.
Yes.
And we need to make it happen. And we need to defend it against challenges. And we need to get these projects built. Let them operate the way that the agencies say that they will. And if the agencies are right and it fixes all of our problems, then great. And if the agency's underestimated, then guess what? We're going to come back, but we're going to be in a better place than we were when we started.
Has Everglades Law Center found itself challenging some of the agencies directly in recent years at all? Because I'm not familiar with your
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of different
track
stuff.
record exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we've been involved in a lot of different projects. We've been in projects in Palm Beach County. We have a couple different projects in litigation now in Miami-Dade County. We have some issues that are going on down there with the urban development boundary, which is obviously a similar issue to, you know, some of the development issues that you have here.
Mhm.
Miami-Dade County also has an urban development boundary that's seeing a lot of pressure to expand it. In Miami-Dade County, when you do expand it, you're basically expanding it directly into the Everglades. So it kind of compounds the harm because it takes, the other part of it is that, you know, Everglades restoration and that part of the system is not as far developed as up here. You know, up here you have the Indian River Lagoon South Project, and it's been, you know, Maggie Hirchala did that project back decades ago and was a huge part of that. And, you know, so you guys have had your project that's been identified, but in Miami-Dade County, they're still doing that. That analysis is still happening. So when developments are happening down there, like literally every development takes land off the table for Everglades restoration.
Mm-hmm.
So every project that's approved, that means we have less options available to restore, because not only just the timing, but the location and the fact that like all of this land is under consideration for future restoration projects. So we have a few projects, like I said, down there where we're challenging development approvals that could significantly impact our ability to restore the Everglades.
But larger agencies, you know, because
Oh, okay, sorry.
I know, no. I see, you know, that you have the Corps, right? You have South Florida Water Management, and not that they're not doing a great job, right? But I don't know that there's sort of a, you know, nipping at them a little bit, or, you know, the shark in the tank that keeps them paying attention.
Yeah, well, for sure.
Because bureaucracy can always sort of become larger
Yeah.
and less efficient and lose sight of the true goal.
Yeah,
The Corps is doing a great job, so I don't mean to come across the wrong way.
Yeah, but listen, the
having
Corps is doing a good
people
job
like
now,
you guys-
but that's what, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're there for.
Yep.
We are kind of there to make sure that these projects are actually going to restore our system. You know, like Sugar doesn't trust the Corps and water managers. You know, we don't necessarily trust them all the time either. So we have a lot of...
to be more specific, maybe
yeah.
BMAPs
Yeah,
is what is really what
Yeah,
what's
okay.
brewing
Yep.
in my head.
Yeah,
more
BMAPs.
than
for sure.
you know, like LOSUM or LORS. It's
Yeah.
like, is there, you know, how do we
That's an
how do
area
we create any
where
accountability?
We need to, because
know?
obviously the BMAPs aren't really working.
Because I don't know that the agencies are really
The water quality
able.
issues are very challenging. We haven't been, I don't think that BMAPs have really been effective in reaching our water quality goals. I don't feel like that's a crazy position. I mean, we're not there.
It
We still
seems
have a,
pretty much like that's what everybody says.
yeah. We
It
still,
could be better.
yeah, could be better. Could be better. Definitely need to look at the water quality stuff. Unfortunately, you know, again, like north of the lake, you know, you kind of have, you have to develop programs that are effective for the types of, you know, types of development and areas that you have, like south of the lake, a lot of that stuff has been really effective because you're talking about like sugar fields, which are like level and they're all the same crop and there's no variation. And they're just like a grid of canals and they're easy to operate. You can tell where the water's going and where it's not going. And, north of the lake, it's not really that same situation.
Right.
And we got like situations up there where it's just a lot harder to manage. And also like, you have some good habitat. So luckily now the water management district is moving forward with some plans. They have a stormwater treatment area that they're moving forward with.
That lower Kissimmee.
That lower
STA.
Yeah, and then I think that they're actually doing another one. Is that the one that's in Okeechobee? I know that there's another one that they are.
I had just seen it in Gil's article or
yeah.
Post.
So there, there's definitely opportunities there with the BMAP and other state programs. I think that is. I'm not going to say low-hanging fruit, but there's certainly a lot of room for improvement in those programs. And they probably could use more oversight. Unfortunately, we kind of have some capacity issues. I mean, there's 4 attorneys. We don't have 400, unfortunately.
Yeah,
and, if we did, 100%,
how do we help you raise enough money to where you can hire 400?
Well, listen, that's amazing. Obviously, like I said, we're a not-for-profit organization. We do take donations. They are a huge part of our budget. That's really what we rely on. Grants and donations are the vast majority of what we use to fund our work. Client paid fees are really only a very small part of it, and we generally do our work pro bono. It's because our clients generally can't afford to pay. I mean, sure, if we represent a local government, they can, but not always. And we generally represent environmental groups.
So from my perception of Everglades Law Center is you actually, do well the thing that you're in existence to do, right? Your organization
we're lawyers.
Actually is just lawyers.
We're lawyers for the Everglades. Yeah, we're lawyers for the environment. We try not to, I do a lot of policy advocacy.
You're not grifting.
I'm not grifting. No, we're not grifting, unfortunately, and that's the thing. Like, we really only get involved in litigation where we have a really good indication that we're going to be successful.
You have to be efficient. We
have to be efficient. There's no point in, like, for us, there's absolutely zero value in churning or anything that would just, like, kind of standard legal practice of just stretching things out, or that does zero for us. So we are 100% about efficiency, getting involved in things where we absolutely can make a difference, and making sure that there are lawyers. One thing that we say all the time is that they always have lawyers.
Yep.
The sugar industry always has lawyers. Developers have lawyers. Special interest has lawyers. Government entities have lawyers. Do environmentalists have lawyers? Because they need them.
Does the St. Lucie River have a lawyer?
Does the St. Lucie River have a lawyer?
Does the Everglades have a lawyer? No.
It needs one. And so that's what we try to do. We try to be here and we try to work with the groups that are already engaged. So, we try not to like reinvent the wheel and start from scratch. We try to provide legal services to folks that are already working on these issues. So we have a lot of partners, and we work with all the biggest environmental groups in the state.
You need like a killer PR person or something to make the rounds.
If you know anyone, just give me a call.
You need somebody making the rounds like you're doing it now.
Yeah.
You should probably be working on a brief or something, but
yeah, probably.
You're doing PR, but you almost need somebody loud and proud out there getting donations,
Yeah, we do. We are like I said, we're a small organization, but we do a lot of good work, and we do, like I said, we try to just stick as lawyers.
How long has Everglades Law Center existed?
We're coming up on our
kind of touched on the history
30th
a little bit.
Year, actually. We've been around since 1995.
Cool.
And we're coming up on our 30th year in 2025. And we have just, we've grown. But we've also really stayed true to our roots, which is just making sure that we have the land we need to do Everglades restoration. And then also not just the land, but the water.
Can I say, I think it's amazing, not to flatter you, but it is amazing that you've existed for 30 years. The organization has existed for 30 years, and it's not compromised. I don't know how to say it.
No one
absorbed by...
some other
that you're not a front for a developer, you know what I mean? Didn't morph.
They never even try to approach us. I don't know. I guess they just know.
But we're open.
It's
Yes.
funny. Like they just, I guess that they just know. No, I don't know. No one ever approaches us to
I'm ready
buy
for
us
an
off.
Aston Martin. I'm tired of my normal car.
But I guess that they just know that we're like
You're serious.
die hard,
Yep. Good.
die hard admirers, and that's really what's kind of, and we all are. You know, that's the thing. We all just really care about this area, and we do it because, you know, it's important, and that's why we want to do it. So, good stuff.
How can we, help you guys? Obviously, write donations, but
Sure,
how
we
can
appreciate that.
how can
but
residents, how can local businesses
continue
get
to be involved?
Yeah.
Continue to be
With
involved in
Everglades
these.
Law.
Yeah, I mean, with Everglades Law Center, but also just on these issues.
Got it.
And we do want to continue to work with the city of Stewart for sure. I think we have a great opportunity on LOSOM to
I'm in.
coordinate. Yeah,
So-
we're in. For
And
sure.
I'm the most
We're-
obnoxious one up there.
We're in.
So
And
I'll
honestly,
fight.
like, this was a great case because it allowed the city to be involved. You didn't have to actually be a party to litigation, but also, and you're also, I mean, very clearly on the side of right, and very much on the side of right for your citizens. And
Are you going to have the resources, personnel-wise, to really get involved in being parties along with the Corps?
on LOSOM?
Yeah.
If there is a legal challenge to LOSOM, we certainly are going to consider it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's really important. Obviously, it's the next big thing, the next biggest issue where these issues could come up. We'll have to see what happens.
Do you have other groups that you work with or
I mean, we work.
with?
Yeah, we work. Like I said, we work with pretty much almost every environmental group that's working on Everglades.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no one that we don't work with for the most part. I mean,
So you got your team, but you're part of a larger network.
yeah, I mean, we have our team, but like we work with all the biggest groups, and we work on like just all the issues that affect restoration from one end to the other. And we need more capacity. I mean, it'd be great. We're just limited by our capacity. We're limited by how much we can do. How much can we subsidize this organization by just working, hours after hours after hours, like to a certain extent, all of us do that.
Mm-hmm.
All of us at Everglades Law Center kind of subsidize it a little bit because we all just really care about it. So none of us are just clocking it in and out. We're all just kind of doing this as our cause.
You got to link up with these
So-
guys that were involved in the 3M case that
Yeah.
we hired. I mean, these guys were zipping down in their jets from the Hamptons
That's not us, unfortunately. So
to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate it. I
Anything
really
else?
appreciate the opportunity to talk
anything else
about
that's
it.
top of mind?
I mean, I think that we've pretty much covered it today, but certainly glad to come back and talk about other issues. When LOSOM starts kicking up again, we should come back and talk
I'm
about
gonna keep
that.
bugging you. I'm gonna be texting
I
you.
absolutely
and
will do it.
I want to know what's
I'll-
going on.
Yeah,
and
no,
how we can help.
100%. And we will, listen, we'll have to see what happens with this case.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's
When
going to have
does
a lot
it,
of impact on LOSOM.
What's the timeline for the case?
Well, the case is not quite
The
fully
appeal.
briefed yet. Our part is fully briefed,
Mhm.
but Sugar Industry gets to file a reply brief or 3 reply briefs, I guess, because they each get to file one.
So it could.
They're just going to file another brief in the case, and then the case will be fully briefed later this year, I expect.
Does this tie up LOSOM at all?
It does not tie
Right.
up LOSOM officially in any way, but whether the Corps is going to be wanting to get out ahead of this, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could, but it probably won't. But some of the legal issues that are implicated here are certainly also at play in LOSOM.
You don't see it lasting though 2 years like the original case. Years.
I mean,
Maybe.
like I said, the case will be fully briefed by the end of this year,
Okay.
and then it'll just be awaiting a decision. Although
Which might take.
oral argument, they've requested oral argument, so you're probably looking at several months
Okay.
before a decision would be made. And then, I mean, that kind of does coincide with the time when LOSOM would be getting started.
So then we'll be gearing up for that.
The thing about LOSOM and legal challenges is that under the Administrative Procedures Act, legal challenges don't need to be brought for 7 years. So you don't need to challenge it right away. Even if it's approved, they could let it go and file a challenge later at some point.
But that wouldn't be in their best interest, right?
Probably not. They would
Yeah.
probably want to challenge it early on. Honestly, I really don't know. I mean, I see
I know
some of
it's
the same
speculative.
issues. I
Yeah.
see some of the same issues being relevant. Obviously, the baseline and the intervening non-SERP type of considerations. Intervening non-SERP actions that could impact the water supply. those are, and like the impact of Laura's 2008 as one of those. I mean, obviously that's all going to be at play in LOSOM. And so depending on how the court rules, I think will govern what their challenge looks like if they bring one.
Do you guys ever, I guess it would probably be between the core and, it's okay,
Yeah.
between the core and sugar, but are we sitting down, is anybody mediating and trying to, or
In
is
this case?
it, yeah.
No, there is no mediation or anything in it. I don't know. I don't know if there was any attempt to do that at a lower court level. I cannot recall whether that was part. I don't believe that there was any mediation, and I don't know whether they just said it would be futile or whether it wasn't.
Not worth it. Let's just go big.
I don't know whether it was even brought up. Honestly, I just don't know.
So we'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, keep an eye out,
Yeah.
and we'll keep you posted when
Please
we
do.
hear anything.
Let me know what's going on
Yeah.
and how
And
we
if
can
you want
help.
some reading material here, I'll leave these with you.
Perfect. I will look at them. I am a nerd.
You should look at the core brief and the water management district brief. I thought that those briefs were really good on our
The
side.
only two I had seen was your recent
Yeah.
brief, and then the original. I saw it in a PDF, but it was what the judge had commented.
Yeah. Yeah, the judge's order.
But I didn't sit on it for very long. I didn't really look deep, so I'll love to look at it
Yeah. No problem.
to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'll let you have all that stuff. So
Awesome.
very good.
Thank you.
All right, Chris.
for
Thanks
doing
so
this.
much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
All right.